Shalom and welcome to today's edition of Rabbi Ron in the House. I want to start by looking at a scripture from 1 Corinthians chapter 7. There's a verse here that I believe often gets misunderstood, or there's misinformation, misteaching about this that connects with something from our parsha. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 19, Paul says, circumcision is nothing and uncircumcision is nothing. Keeping God's commands is what counts. Sometimes Christians misunderstand this text. They don't understand. They say, see, Paul's saying it's worthless. There's no value. There's no purpose. Now, in being circumcised. Now, it's true in getting righteousness or having right standing with God, circumcision accomplishes nothing. It never did. The purpose of circumcision is to make us physically a Jew, a physical descendant of Abraham. Paul is not anti-circumcision, nor the teachers of the New Covenant. Paul, when he was going to the temple in Jerusalem and one day was taking Timothy with him, he realized, Timothy being the son of interfaith parents, that he was never circumcised, and so therefore brought him first to get circumcised before he could bring him into the temple so as to do things properly and according to the teachings of God in the Scriptures. And so Paul is not anti-circumcision. He understands the purpose and the place of it and what it does. Sometimes as well, this misunderstanding saying that the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament, all it does is say physical circumcision and that's it. That's not the case. It understands circumcision of the heart. In this week's parsha in Leviticus 26, what it says is this: when that they're talking about people who were disobedient and not following God, he then says that then when their uncircumcised hearts are humbled and they pay for their sins, I will remember my covenant with Jacob and my covenant with Isaac and Abraham and remember the land. And so the teachings, Moses here says, uncircumcision of the heart is a problem. Our hearts need to be circumcised. Speaking to Jewish people who were physically circumcised, saying just because you're physically circumcised doesn't mean you've got everything right with God and are in right standing with God. Your hearts need to be circumcised. When your hearts are circumcised and humbled, then God will remember His covenant and will receive the blessings. Jeremiah also tells us the same thing in chapter 4. Circumcise yourselves to the Lord. Circumcise your hearts, you men of Judah and people of Jerusalem, or my wrath will break out and burn like fire because of the evil you have done. And so Jeremiah is saying the same thing. You may be physically circumcised, but your hearts are not circumcised, and therefore your relationship is suffering, is in trouble with God. And so Christians don't sit there and think physical circumcision is worthless. It does not get right standing with God, but it has a place and a purpose in the whole teachings of God. But as well, all of us out there need to remember circumcision of the heart is what matters. That is what gets us in right standing. When our hearts have been circumcised and they are humbled before the Lord, then we're right with God. And so I want to encourage you to keep an eye on your heart. Thanks for joining me. This has been Rabbi Ron in the House.